All right, so think about this for a minute. What would happen if America announced that every single adult in the United States would start receiving $2,000 a month in universal basic income? People across the country would wake up and they would see in their bank accounts $2,000 deposited overnight. Families would sit around and calculate how much more they could afford, how much less they might have to work, and so on. But at the end of the day, what do you think that means for everybody? What do you think that means for the price of eggs, for the price of gasoline, for the price of housing, for the price of everything? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know what would happen, but I suspect that there would be massive amounts of inflation. And when I say massive, I mean 60, 70, 80%. And I don't think that universal base income would change anything at all. At the end of the day, all it really is going to do is give people a false sense of financial security. Because if everybody's getting $2,000 a month, it's not all of a sudden going to change the way people act and what they do. Okay, what it's going to change is how much things cost. It is without a doubt going to cost when it comes to inflation. And I think that we have a prime example of what universal base income would do if we just roll back and look at what happened during the pandemic and COVID. A lot of people got a lot of free money. They received unemployment simply because all the businesses were closed. Somebody had to pay them. They had to go out and buy food and continue to pay for their apartments and their houses and things like that. So I can understand that, under those emergency circumstances, politicians thought that it might be best to give people free money. And at the end of the day, we're still suffering from that. I mean, now most states have very high inflation, and it has to do with minimum wage laws. It has to do with all the free money that is still in circulation after all this time. And it has done a lot more harm than good, in my opinion. And like I said, I am not a financial expert. I'm not an economist. I don't know what a universal base income, the ultimate result would be, okay? But I can read the handwriting on the wall, and I can look at it and think to myself and say to myself, hey, if everybody suddenly started getting $2,000 a month for free for doing absolutely nothing, I think you would have a lot of people who would sit there and they would look at that and they go, oh, I don't have to go to work this month. I don't have to go to work today. I don't have to go to work for a week because they're getting $2,000 a month for doing absolutely nothing. Okay. So let's just say, for example, and we'll make the math real easy. Let's just say somebody made $4,000 a month. Okay. I don't think that's an unreasonable salary. Let's say they made $4,000 a month, and that's working 4 weeks a month, working the entire month, 5 days a week. Are they now going to say to themselves, well, I get $2,000 for free from the government, so now I only have to work 2 weeks a month? And I think you would see that. I think you would see a lot of people who would look at it like that and would treat it like, oh, this is a way for me to enjoy the good life and not go out and work and be a productive member of society for at least 2 weeks every month. And I don't think that does anybody good, any good whatsoever. At the end of the day, all that really does is add to people's financial stress and drives up inflation. Plain and simple. There's no question in my mind that's exactly what would happen. At first, I think universal base income would allow smart families to get out from under huge amounts of debt. If people were smart, what they would do, they would take that money and immediately start funneling it towards any kind of credit card debt that they may have. If they don't have any debt whatsoever, they would immediately put it into a savings account or something like that, a rainy day fund, whatever, however they choose to save. If it was me, I would put it in precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, stuff like that. But if families really thought about it long and hard, that's what they would do. I mean, because consumer spending, it would surge as people bought things and that they delayed buying for years. With that new $2,000 a month, you'd all of a sudden see people go out and buy things that they might normally not buy. They may put new furniture in their house. They may go buy a new car. They may go on vacations. That's what I think people would do. I think you'd see a lot of people going on these vacations that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. And again, this just feeds into inflation at the end of the day. I think a lot of workers, like I said before, would cut their hours at work, or they would just leave their jobs altogether. Okay? They would leave jobs that they really didn't like at all and maybe go back to school, try and find a new career path, whatever it may be. I do think you would see a large percentage of people either reduce the amount of time they spent at work or just quit that job altogether. I think you would see businesses struggle to hire and find qualified people. I think it would be a thing where it would drastically shift the way business operated in the United States and all over the world, for that fact, because I really believe you'd see just so many people stop going to work. And, it might even be a thing where even your white collar workers, some of them may even decide to retire early, take their pension plus the $2,000 a month and just get out of Dodge. Instead of retiring at 55, they retire at 40 or 45 because they might be able to afford to do it then. I mean, new small businesses and side hustles you'd see them everywhere. I think people would say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take my $2,000 a month and I'm going to invest it in starting my software business, or I'm going to invest it starting my plumbing business, whatever it may be. I think you'd see, a certain percentage of people that would really try to start their own business and hang their own shingle and not have to worry about working for somebody else anymore. But at the end of the day, you're still going to see, in my opinion, a huge rise in inflation, plain and simple. All right, so let's now talk about the monster rearing its head, and that is the severe repercussions of inflation. I think very quickly, within 3 to 6 months, maybe sooner, you would see rent and housing prices go through the roof in response to higher demand. People who were living in, let's say, poorer communities would most likely try to move up, try to get better housing, better apartments, which would increase the price of those apartments and houses because there would be higher demand. And I think you would just see real estate prices go through the roof. No doubt about it. Inflation is one of those things that it casts a huge shadow. It affects every aspect of the economy, from fuel to food to housing to textiles. It affects everything. There's just no way around it. If people can afford to pay more, businesses are going to charge more. That's just the way it works. I mean, look, grocery bills, they would rise pretty quick. There's no doubt in my mind. If you were paying $2.99 for a dozen eggs and all of a sudden everybody started getting $2,000 in universal base income, I think those eggs might suddenly cost $6.99 or more. You just don't know. I mean, I think groceries would be just as expensive as they are now, because you have to remember that everybody is going to have more money to compete for these products, plain and simple. Capitalism, it's a competition. Who can buy? Who can pay the most? That is the competition, and products and services, they tend to find a level playing field where the masses can afford them. And with inflation, businesses are going to raise prices to offset the cost of labor and to offset how many people are quitting on them and not working. I mean, there's just so many aspects of this that I don't hear people talk about when they mention universal base income. You know, inflation would very quickly become a center for national debate. There's just no doubt about it. Everybody would throw their hat in the ring and claim to be experts, plain and simple. You know, you'd have politicians, you'd have business leaders, everybody that you can think of would come out and say they had the solution. You know, I think some households might feel wealthier with $2,000 a month in base income, but I don't think very many of them would. You know, a lot of economists warn that universal base income would do exactly what I'm talking about right now. And I think it's funny that when you do the research on who is touting this universal base income, you know, it's these big billionaire business people, you know, people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman and, you know, Milton Friedman. These people are all supporters of universal base income. But look how much money they have. I mean, do they really relate to you and I? Do they understand what inflation does to people, what it does to families? I don't think they do. You know, I really don't. I think they're so far removed from that, you know, they don't have a clue. And the problem is they're so successful at what they do. You know, they're successful and really good business leaders. And it gives them this sense of self-importance and superiority that they think that no matter what they say or do, it's going to be right. And I don't think they're right about this. All right, well, I mean, this is about it for this video. So let me know what you think. Drop your comment below. Are you a fan of universal base income? Or do you think it would lead to massive inflation that would absolutely change nothing? I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for watching. Thanks.